The scream was a venomous whisper in the sea breeze. "What's that old parasite doing here? We don't have room for you." My daughter-in-law's voice shattered the stillness of my private sanctum. I was standing at the threshold of my beachside studio, the heavy key fob clutched in a hand that now trembled. The air, which should have carried the scent of salt and eucalyptus, was thick with the stench of cheap cigarettes and stale beer. My sanctuary, the place where I had poured 30 years of my soul into every stitch and every design, had been overrun. This was more than a home. It was a testament to a life built from nothing. I had driven out to the coast that Friday morning, craving the solitude that only this place could offer, a quiet weekend of sketching new designs and finding inspiration in the restless waves. Instead, I found a chaotic scene ripped from a nightmare. 3 unfamiliar SUVs were crammed into my driveway, their mud-splattered tires crushing the immaculate oyster shell gravel I had laid myself. A cacophony of jarring pop music blared from the open French doors of my main gallery, drowning out the soothing sound of the ocean I so cherished. Children I had never seen were running amok on my lawn, their raucous laughter echoing a sense of complete entitlement. One little boy, no older than 8, was using one of my vintage terracotta pots, a vessel I had carefully chosen from a market in Provence and used to grow scarlet geraniums, as a makeshift goalpost. The sight of my beloved flowers trampled, the earth scattered across the pristine grass, sent a jolt of ice through my veins. My bespoke teak deck furniture, the very pieces I had sourced from a Balinese artisan and polished by hand, were piled high with soggy towels and cheap discarded clothing. A stray volleyball lay deflated on the floor, its neon plastic mocking the elegant tranquility I had so painstakingly cultivated. As I stepped onto the deck, a wave of revulsion washed over me. This was an invasion, a desecration. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape. Then I saw her. Sylvie. She stood in the main doorway, a sneer plastered on her face, arms crossed as if she were the queen of this domain. And on her, I saw it. The bespoke linen apron I had meticulously embroidered for myself with delicate silver thread. An apron I had designed to protect my creations, not to be soiled by the careless hands of a stranger. Her eyes, filled with a cold, condescending light, met mine. It was the same look she always gave me at family dinners when she thought I wasn't watching. A look that said I was nothing more than an aging woman clinging to a past that had no relevance to her modern, bustling life. "Sylvie, what's going on?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. "I didn't expect you here. This is my home." She let out a dry, scornful laugh that twisted my gut. "Oh, please," she scoffed, tossing a wave of blonde hair over her shoulder. "Graham said we could use the house. We're actually doing something useful, unlike you. You just come here to mope and interrupt our family's plans." More faces appeared behind her, a parade of strangers. Her sister Isabel with her 2 sullen teenagers. Her mother, a woman with a face set in stone, who eyed me as if I were a common trespasser. And 3 more people I couldn't place. An older man in a garish Hawaiian shirt, a young woman cradling a baby, and another man calmly smoking on my balcony, the smoke from his cigarette marring the glass pane. They all gawked at me with a mixture of annoyance and surprise, as if my presence was an unforgivable inconvenience. "Is this the famous mother-in-law?" Sylvie's mother asked, her voice dripping with mockery as she looked me up and down. I thought she'd be more imposing. She looked so ordinary. A malicious snicker rippled through the group. My face flushed with a heat that had nothing to do with the sun. Here I was, at 65 years old, in my simple travel clothes, being judged by a family of strangers on my own property. The humiliation was a physical ache, a searing burn that reached deep into my soul. "Where is Graham?" I asked, my voice trembling now. "My son had to be here. He would explain everything. This had to be some terrible misunderstanding." "Graham is working as always," Sylvie replied, a triumphant smirk on her lips. "Unlike you, he has real responsibilities. Look, Eleanora, there's no room for you here. All the beds are taken. The kitchen is being used, and frankly, your presence will only create unnecessary tension. Why don't you just go to a hotel? The word struck me like a physical blow. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. She was kicking me out. Of my own home. The home I had built with a widow's grief and a seamstress's tireless devotion. A home that was not just made of wood and glass, but of every sacrifice, every late night, every single dollar I had saved. The indignity was unbearable. "This is my house, Sylvie," I managed to say, my voice raw with a pain she couldn't possibly comprehend. "I have the legal deeds. I pay all the taxes and all the bills." "Oh, stop it," she interrupted, her voice rising in a venomous crescendo. Always the same song. "How it's yours, how you paid for it. Graham is your son, isn't he? What's yours is also his, and what's his is also mine. That's how normal families work." The children had stopped playing. Everyone was watching, their silent gazes a jury of my peers waiting for me to break. The humiliation burned hotter than any fire, but something inside me refused to crumble. I would not give them the show they so desperately wanted. "It's quite all right, my dear," I finally said, my lips forming a smile that never reached my eyes. It was a brittle, fragile thing, a shield to protect my dignity. "I understand the situation perfectly." Sylvie's victorious grin widened. The others looked satisfied, as if they had just witnessed a just triumph. They had no idea. As I turned and walked away from my own property with slow, measured steps, a cold, dangerous fury began to burn deep in my gut. They had just declared a war they had no idea how to fight. And I, Eleanora Vance, was a veteran of far worse battles. I had survived poverty and grief, and I had built an empire from the threads of a single spool. They had just underestimated the wrong woman. As I walked away, the biting sea air felt like a cruel mockery of my defeat. I could feel the hostile gazes of Sylvie's family boring into my back, a silent cheer for my supposed retreat. But retreat was not what I was doing. I was regrouping. My mind was already racing, replaying the events of the last few minutes, a slow-motion reel of indignity and disbelief. How had my son, the boy I had raised with such a fierce and devoted love, allowed this to happen? How had he become a man who could stand idly by while his wife, this woman of such brazen entitlement, humiliated his own mother? The question was a sharp, twisting knife in my heart. My thoughts drifted back 2 decades, to a time when this pristine coastal land was nothing more than a wild, overgrown patch of earth, a vacant lot filled with stubborn weeds and impossible dreams. I was 45 then, a fresh widow, a raw ache of grief still a constant companion. My husband, Graham's father, had left this world too soon, and I was left to navigate a new life as a single mother. My small apartment in the city felt suffocating, a mausoleum of shared memories. I needed a project, a purpose, something to pour my broken heart into. This property, a small unassuming ad in the local paper, was an impulsive purchase, a gamble, a leap of faith into a future I couldn't yet see. I had been a couture seamstress all my life, my hands the instruments of my craft. I had built a reputation for exquisite design and meticulous detail, creating wedding gowns that flowed like poetry and evening dresses that shimmered with starlight. Every single dollar I earned came from the tireless, painstaking work of my hands. I would wake at 4 a.m., my sewing machine a whirring hymn to industry, and work until late in the evening. My fingers bled 1,000 times on that very machine, the same one now sitting, dusty and forgotten, in a corner of my invaded studio. But every stitch was a brick. Every spool of silk thread was a mortgage payment. Every bespoke button was a down payment on a dream. This was not a house. It was a monument to resilience. When I approached the architect with my vision, he looked at me with open skepticism. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his eyes scanning my simple clothes and my calloused hands. "This is a grand design, a professional studio and a home. The cost will be immense, at least $350,000. Are you certain you can handle such an expense?" I didn't say a word. I simply took out my bank book, the small, worn testament to my years of labor, and laid it on his polished mahogany desk. The number in the savings column was exactly $350,000. Every cent of it was earned with the work of my own hands, saved with a discipline born of necessity and a vision born of hope. He looked at the number, then at me, and a newfound respect dawned in his eyes. Graham, then a university student, accompanied me on the first day the construction workers arrived. His face shone with an excitement I hadn't seen in him since his father's passing. "Mom," he asked, his voice full of wonder as he looked at the empty plot of land, "are we really going to have a beach house?" "We're not just going to have it, son," I replied, a small smile touching my lips as I marked the first foundation lines with a piece of chalk. "We're going to build it, with our own hands." And so we did. For 2 years, every single weekend I drove out here. I wasn't just a supervisor. I was an active participant. I mixed concrete, painted walls, and planted every single flower in my now trampled garden. Graham joined me whenever his classes allowed, his enthusiasm fueling my own. Together, we chose the ceramic tiles for the studio floor, the creamy white color of the exterior walls, and the exact placement of each window to maximize the light and the sea breeze. When the last window was installed, and the final coat of paint was drying, Graham stood on the terrace and wrapped his arms around me in a tight embrace. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you are the strongest woman I know. Someday, when I have a family of my own, I will tell them how my mother built this paradise with pure love and hard work." The memory was a bittersweet pang in my chest. How had that same boy, that earnest young man, come to allow his wife to humiliate me in the very place we had built together? This wasn't just a home. It was the symbol of my independence after my husband's death. It was the proof that a woman could stand on her own, without depending on anyone. It was my sanctuary, my refuge, my monument to survival. Every object in this place had a story. The dining table was bought with the extra money I earned from a frantic 3 months of making communion dresses. The elegant linen curtains were sewn from a bolt of fabric I found on sale. The hand-painted ceramic plates I had collected one by one, saving for months to complete the set. All of it now either stained, destroyed, or worse, stolen. I remembered the early years of Graham and Sylvie's marriage, when she had visited. She was a grateful guest then, full of praise and compliments. "Oh, Mother Vance, what a beautiful home. You must be so proud of everything you've accomplished." She helped me cook, she played with the children on the beach, and she even brought me a bouquet of flowers from the market on her visits. When had everything changed? When had she started to see me as a burden instead of the woman who had given her a husband and a beautiful home to visit? Perhaps it was when Graham's career took off and she quit her job. Or maybe it was when they bought their own grand house in the city, and she began to feel superior to the widowed seamstress who lived in a quiet apartment. The signs had been there for years, but I had chosen to ignore them. Her patronizing comments about my age, "Mother Vance, you should rest more. It's not good for you to work so hard at your age." Her suggestions about my clothes, "Why don't you buy something more modern? Graham makes good money now. He can help you." And the most insidious hints about my home, "What a waste for this beautiful house to sit empty most of the time." Now I understood. It had all been a carefully orchestrated plan, calculated and designed to humiliate me and take what I had built with so much effort. The invasion wasn't spontaneous. It was a planned act of aggression. A cold, pure rage rose within me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in decades. It wasn't the kind of rage that makes you scream and lose control. It was something far more dangerous. It was the intelligent fury of a woman who had survived poverty, widowhood, and decades of hard, honest work. Sylvie had just made a fatal mistake. She had underestimated Eleanora Vance. As I got into my car and started the engine, my mind was no longer clouded by the pain of humiliation. The raw ache had been replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. They thought they had defeated me. They thought I was a fragile old woman with no defenses, a docile creature who would simply accept my fate and find a hotel. They couldn't have been more wrong. I had been preparing for a moment like this my entire life. Not for a family betrayal, but for any challenge that might threaten my independence and my peace of mind. I had built a life of self-reliance, of quiet strength. And now, that strength would be put to the ultimate test. My first stop was my bank in the city. I bypassed the tellers and went straight to the private banking section, where my personal financial advisor, a man named Mr. Sterling, greeted me with a warm, professional smile. He had handled my accounts for over 30 years, since I first brought in the savings from my seamstress work. He had seen my small nest egg grow into a significant fortune, and he understood the discipline and sacrifice that had gone into every single dollar. "Eleanora," he said, gesturing for me to sit in a plush leather armchair. "It's a pleasure to see you. How can I assist you today?" "Mr. Sterling, I need a complete updated balance of all my accounts, including savings, checking, and my investment portfolio. And I need to discuss a very sensitive legal matter." He didn't hesitate. He simply typed on his keyboard, and the numbers appeared on the screen. He turned to face me. For the first time since my car ride began, I felt a flicker of a smile touch my lips. The total balance was a figure that would make most people gasp. Sylvie had completely miscalculated. She had assumed I was a poor, lonely old lady living on a meager pension, a woman who had no resources to fight back. She didn't know that Eleanora Vance had been a saver, a shrewd investor, a woman who had squirreled away every penny to protect herself from the very situation I now faced. My savings account, my CDs, my stocks and bonds, it was a formidable war chest, a testament to a lifetime of discipline and hard work. The total was far, far more than anyone would have expected. "Mr. Sterling," I continued, my voice now steady and commanding, "I need you to immediately freeze any attempts by third parties to access my accounts. I also need an official letter from the bank, signed by a senior executive, confirming my mental capacity to manage my own finances." A very explicit, very detailed letter. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of grave concern. "That's a very serious request, Eleanora. Is there a problem?" "My son and daughter-in-law are attempting to have me declared mentally incompetent to seize my assets," I stated, the words leaving my mouth with the cold precision of a surgeon's scalpel. His face hardened. "That is an outrageous and illegal act. You need a lawyer. A very good one. I have the name of the best lawyer specializing in this type of family law and asset fraud. His name is Walter Thorne. He is a formidable opponent in these kinds of cases. Tell him I sent you." He scribbled the name and number on a piece of notepaper and handed it to me. I felt a surge of new energy run through my veins, a power born not just from the money I had earned, but from the mental clarity of having a concrete plan of action. I had a name, a contact, and a purpose. My next move was already mapped out. I left the bank and, from the solitude of my car in the parking lot, I called Walter Thorne's office. His secretary, a brisk but pleasant woman, listened to my request for an urgent meeting. "Mr. Thorne can see you at 4 this afternoon," she said. "He has an opening, and Mr. Sterling's recommendation holds a great deal of weight. It sounds like you have a situation that needs immediate attention. It's very urgent," I confirmed, "and I will be there." I spent the next few hours meticulously preparing for the meeting. I returned to my apartment and began to gather everything I would need. The fraudulent property transfer papers I had discovered, the crumpled screenshots of Isabel's social media boasting about our new beach house, the list of my stolen jewelry and other valuables. I made copies of my legitimate property deeds and tax receipts from the last 2 decades. I printed out every single photo I had taken on my phone, the trampled geraniums, the stained furniture, the disorganized mess in my studio. It was a folder full of evidence, a narrative of their crime told in images and paper. At precisely 4 o'clock, I was sitting in Walter Thorne's elegant wood-paneled office. He was a man in his late 60s with kind but intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor that instantly inspired trust. He listened to my story without a single interruption, his expression unreadable as I narrated every excruciating detail. The invasion of my home, the humiliation, the discovery of the fraudulent documents and the fake medical report, the stolen heirlooms, and most painful of all, the silent betrayal of my son. He took detailed, precise notes, his pen scratching against the paper. When I finished, he put his pen down and leaned back in his chair, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice deep and measured, "your case is solid. Very, very solid. We have multiple offenses here: criminal trespass, grand larceny, attempted asset fraud, falsification of documents, and a potential criminal investigation into medical corruption. Your family didn't just step in it. They walked right into a legal minefield. The rage that had been a cold ember in my gut now flared into a clean, bright fire. I could see the path to justice, and it was a straight line. "What can we do?" I asked, my voice as hard and determined as the man sitting across from me. "Several things. First, tomorrow morning we will file a formal eviction lawsuit for illegal trespass. Second, we will file a police report for the theft of your heirlooms. Third, we will report the fraudulent medical documents to the medical board and the district attorney's office. And fourth, we will request a restraining order to prevent them from using your name or property in any future fraudulent schemes." "How long will this all take?" I asked, my eyes fixed on his. "The eviction can be immediate if the judge sees clear evidence. In these cases, where the trespassers have no legal right to the property, the law moves quickly. As for the rest, it will be a process, but a successful one. My fee for this entire process will be $10,000. Can you pay it?" I didn't even have to think. "I can pay it today," I said, a faint smile touching my lips. "I can pay it right now." His own smile widened. "I enjoy working with clients who are as prepared as you are. Your son and daughter-in-law thought you were a defenseless old lady, Mrs. Vance, but they were sorely mistaken. You are a prepared woman. I have been preparing to defend myself from this world for 65 years, counselor," I said, a glint of steel in my eyes. "I am not going to stop now." "One more question, Mrs. Vance," Walter said, his voice dropping to a serious, almost somber tone. "Are you willing to take this all the way? Because once we start this process, your relationship with your son will likely be irreparable. It will be a matter of legal record. There will be no turning back, no simple family reconciliation. The question hung in the air between us, heavy and final. For a moment I was silent, my mind drifting back to Graham. Not the arrogant man who had allowed this to happen, but the boy. The boy who had helped me plant the garden. The young man who had said I was the strongest woman he knew. A wave of profound sadness washed over me, a pain far deeper than the humiliation I had suffered at the hands of Sylvie. But that sadness was quickly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "Counselor," I said, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. "My son betrayed me for money. He conspired to have me declared mentally incompetent for money. He publicly humiliated me for money. If our relationship can break so easily over money, then it was never a real relationship to begin with. And if he tries to apologize during the process, it will only be because he has been caught. Apologies after the fact don't count." Walter Thorne nodded slowly, a look of respect in his eyes. "Understood. We will proceed with everything. First thing in the morning, we'll file all the necessary lawsuits. We have more than enough evidence to ensure a swift and decisive legal action. There is one more thing," I added, a new thought dawning on me. "I want them to understand that they completely underestimated their opponent. I want them to learn that the consequences of betraying family are real and permanent. I want this to be public." Walter's brow furrowed slightly. "Public? What do you have in mind?" "Court records are public, aren't they?" I asked, "and so are criminal charges. I want every single one of their friends, neighbors, and acquaintances to know exactly what they did. I want the social cost of their betrayal to be as high as the legal cost." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Walter's lips. "That can be arranged. We can ensure this scandalous case gets the attention it deserves from the local media. They will not be able to hide from the consequences of their actions." I left his office with a feeling of profound transformation. I was no longer Eleanora Vance, the betrayed and humiliated mother. Now I was Eleanora Vance, the woman who was fighting back with every legal weapon at my disposal. The anger I had felt was no longer a hot, blinding fury. It was a cold, sharp blade of a weapon. I was calm, collected, and ready for the battle ahead. That evening, from my hotel room, I called my younger sister Camilla, who lived in Texas. I told her everything. From the moment I arrived at my home to the meeting with my lawyer. I didn't omit a single detail, and as I spoke I could hear her gasp in disbelief and her voice fill with righteous indignation. Eleanora, I can't believe Graham would do that. After everything you sacrificed for him? She cried. It's outrageous. I'll fly out tomorrow morning. I'll be there to support you. You don't have to face this alone. It no longer matters what I sacrificed, Camilla, I said, my voice quiet and firm. What matters is what I am going to get back. I have to fight this battle alone. But thank you, sister. Your offer means the world to me. I hung up the phone and sat on the edge of the bed, looking out the window toward the distant coast. I could see the faint glow of the lights from my house, a beacon of my stolen peace. I imagined the music still playing, the laughter, the celebration of the people who believed they had gotten away with it. They were in for a very rude awakening. I was no longer the victim. The hunter had become the hunted. And tomorrow was going to be a very, very different day for all of them. I smiled in the darkness, a cold, predatory curve of my lips. Eleanora Vance had returned to war. The morning sun, usually a source of comfort and warmth, now felt like a spotlight on the impending drama. I was awake before dawn, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my mind a whirl of strategic thoughts. I had to choose my attire with the same precision I would for a couture show. This was not a moment for casual clothes or a disheveled appearance. This was a statement. I chose a sleek, impeccably tailored suit in a deep, elegant charcoal gray. It was a suit that spoke of authority, of strength, of a woman who was in complete control. I styled my hair in a neat chignon, and for the first time in a week, I applied a touch of lipstick. I looked in the mirror, and the woman staring back at me was not the one who had been humiliated a few days ago. She was the architect of her own life, a force of nature. At precisely 8 a.m., a taxi pulled up to the curb. Walter Thorne was waiting. He was not alone. By his side stood a tall, stern-looking police officer and a public notary, their presence a silent official promise of what was to come. I walked to the car, my heels clicking with a deliberate rhythm on the pavement. I was carrying my leather portfolio, a folder of evidence that would bring their flimsy house of cards crashing down. As we drove, my heart was a steady drum in my chest. There was no fear, no anxiety, only a cold anticipation. We arrived at my home at the exact same moment. The driveway was still littered with an array of strange vehicles. Sylvie's family was having a loud, boisterous breakfast on my deck. The smell of sizzling bacon and cheap coffee was a jarring intrusion on the morning air. I watched from the car as Walter and the police officer approached the main door. I saw the look on Sylvie's face as she dropped her coffee cup, the ceramic shattering on the deck floor, when she recognized the official license plates of the police cruiser. Her expression, once so arrogant and triumphant, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. "Good morning," Walter said in a professional, commanding voice. "I am attorney Walter Thorne, legal representative for Mrs. Eleanora Vance, the legitimate owner of this property. We have come to deliver an immediate eviction order for illegal trespass." Sylvie's face went from pale to scarlet. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "This is my husband's house. We have every right to be here." "Ma'am," the police officer interjected, his voice firm. "Do you have any documents that prove legal rights to this property?" My husband is the owner's son," she cried, her voice rising in a panicked shriek. "He gave us permission." "Where is your husband at this moment?" the officer asked. He's at work," she blurted out. Walter calmly took out the first set of documents from his portfolio. "Here, I have the original deed to the property, completely in Mrs. Eleanora Vance's name. I also have the property tax receipts for the last 20 years, all paid by Mrs. Vance herself. And I have this court-ordered immediate eviction for trespass without the owner's consent." Sylvie's mother appeared behind her, her face a mask of shocked disbelief. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What's going on?" I said, stepping forward, my voice as calm as a summer storm. "Is that you invaded my home without my permission, destroyed my property, stole my heirlooms, and tried to strip me of my life's work using fake documents? And now you are going to face the consequences." Isabel, Sylvie's sister, suddenly emerged from the house, her phone held aloft, recording everything. This is elder abuse. The lady is crazy and is harassing us, she yelled into the camera. The public notary stepped forward. Miss, stop recording immediately. This is an official legal proceeding, and you are not authorized to document it. Walter took out more papers, his movements deliberate and unhurried. I also have a formal complaint here for the theft of jewelry and other valuables, with a detailed list of all the missing items and their estimated values. We didn't steal anything, Sylvie shrieked. Then where are the pearl earrings that belonged to Mrs. Vance's mother? The police officer asked, his voice now a deep rumble of authority. And the gold watch of her late husband, insured for a significant amount? Sylvie fell silent, her face a mask of shame and fury. Furthermore, Walter continued, his voice a hammer of truth. We have evidence of falsifying medical documents to try and declare my client mentally incompetent. This, ma'am, is a federal crime punishable by prison time. The police officer looked from the documents to Sylvie with a newfound seriousness. You paid for a fake medical report? He asked. I didn't. We just wanted to help her. She's too old to manage so many properties, Sylvie stammered, tears now streaming down her face. So you decided to steal her house using fraudulent documents? I asked, my voice a quiet, deadly whisper. Just then, Graham's car screeched to a halt in the driveway. He got out, his face a mask of total desperation. The panicked calls from his family had obviously reached him. What's going on here? He asked, out of breath, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion. Your wife and her family are being legally evicted from your mother's property for illegal trespass, Walter explained. And you, Mr. Vance, are being cited as an accomplice in a case of attempted asset fraud. Graham's face, which had been a mask of frantic confusion, went completely ashen. Asset fraud? He repeated, the words a hollow echo. He looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes, but I offered no comfort. Walter Thorne handed him the documents I had found in my secret closet, the papers he was supposed to sign to steal my home. His hands trembled as he took them. For a brief, agonizing moment, I saw the scared little boy he had been, the one who would run to me with every scraped knee and every problem. But that moment was fleeting, replaced by the cowardly man he had become. Mom, I can explain, he said, his voice a whisper of shame. There's nothing left to explain. Graham, I replied, my voice as hard as stone. You already made your choice. You chose them. But I didn't want it to get to this, he protested, a pathetic defense. Didn't want what? I countered, my voice rising slightly. Didn't want me to defend myself? You hoped I would stay quiet while they stole my life's work? Sylvie, her face a storm of rage, approached him. What is your wife telling you, Graham? I asked. Isabel says she wants you to tell the police I have mental problems, that I'm making this all up. Graham looked me in the eyes for the first time in what felt like years. I saw the fear, the shame, and the utter weakness in his gaze. I don't know what to say, Mom. Then don't say anything, I responded. Walter took out the final documents. Mr. Graham Vance, here is your official citation. You have 3 days to appear in family court to answer for the charges of complicity and attempted asset fraud against a senior citizen. Your signature is on the property transfer request. Your name is on the request for your mother's mental incapacity. You authorized the fraudulent use of this property. You are legally responsible for all the damages. Graham's face crumpled. But I'm her son. She can't sue her own son. He stammered, the last shred of his dignity crumbling. The police officer stepped forward. Mr. Vance, the law makes no exceptions for kinship when it comes to fraud and theft. A crime is a crime, no matter who commits it. Sylvie's mother, who had been listening in stunned silence, started to cry. This is so unfair. We're family. Families don't sue each other. Families also don't steal from each other, I replied, my voice unwavering. But you decided to break that rule first. Walter looked at his watch. You have exactly 2 hours to collect your personal belongings and leave the property. Any item that belongs to Mrs. Vance must stay here. The officer will supervise the process to ensure you don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. 2 hours? Isabel shrieked. That's impossible. We have luggage. We have kids. You should have thought about that before invading someone else's property, the notary replied, his voice a dry, indifferent monotone. Sylvie approached me, tears of pure rage now streaming down her face. You're going to pay for this, Eleanora. You're going to pay dearly for humiliating us this way. Graham, say something. Defend your family. Graham looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't love. It wasn't regret. It was pure, unadulterated resentment. Mom, are you really going to go through with this? I've already gone through with it, Graham. You brought me here, but we're family, he pleaded, the words sounding hollow and meaningless. Family? I repeated, my voice dripping with disdain. Family invades houses? Family steals heirlooms? Family fakes legal documents? Family humiliates its elders in public? We just wanted, he stammered. You wanted to rob me, and I want justice, I stated, the words final and irrefutable. Walter closed his folder. The clock has already started. You have 2 hours. I watched as Sylvie's entire family ran toward the house, a panicked swarm of ants. They were shouting at each other, grabbing their belongings, blaming one another for the disaster they had created. But I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching the elaborate plan they had designed to destroy me fall apart before their very eyes. Eleanora Vance had counterattacked and won the first round. The 2 hours that followed were a chaotic blur, a family drama unfolding in fast motion. From the pristine calm of my recovered deck, I watched the chaotic fallout of their invasion. It was a symphony of shouting, crying children, and frantic packing. Sylvie's mother was the first to give up. After half an hour of yelling at her daughter, she collapsed onto the stairs, weeping and refusing to help. This is all your fault, Sylvie, she wailed. You told me everything was settled. You told me the old lady had accepted everything. Mom, just shut up and help me pack. Sylvie screamed back, desperately stuffing clothes into garbage bags. The old lady set a trap for us. She acted like a fragile senior, and it turns out she has lawyers and enough money to bury us. Isabel, ever the opportunist, was filming the entire process on her phone. But her commentary had changed. Gone were the triumphant boasts. Now her voice was full of malice and resentment. This is going to go viral, she yelled, pointing her phone at her sister. Everyone is going to see what kind of person this lady really is. The police officer, who had been a silent observer, calmly walked over to her. Miss, we already warned you about recording during an official legal proceeding. If you continue, you will be arrested for obstruction of justice. Isabel's defiance evaporated, and she reluctantly lowered her phone, her face a picture of seething fury. The children, innocent victims in this mess, ran around the property, confused and crying. One little boy, the one who had used my precious antique pot as a goalpost, approached me. Ma'am, he said, his voice small and tearful. Why are you kicking us out? We didn't do anything wrong. My heart, which had been a stone of cold fury, softened a fraction. The children were pawns in their parents' game. I'm not kicking you out because you did something wrong, sweetie, I said, my voice gentle. I'm asking you to leave because this is my home, and your family came here without asking my permission. But my mom said it was our house now, he said, his little face scrunched up in confusion. Your mom was mistaken, I replied softly. Sylvie, who had overheard our conversation, strode over, her face a mask of rage. Don't talk to my kids, she shrieked. You have no right to confuse them even more. I'm not confusing them, I said, my voice firm. You confused them by bringing them to a house that wasn't yours. This house is ours. Graham is her son. Children inherit from their parents, she yelled, her voice breaking. Children inherit when their parents die, not when their parents are still alive and healthy, I countered, my words a hammer of truth. And you're already old. What do you need such a big beach house for at your age? She snarled, the last of her self-control gone. Walter Thorne, who had been watching with a grim sort of fascination, stepped forward. Ma'am, every comment you make about my client's age is being documented as additional evidence of age discrimination and psychological abuse against a senior citizen. I would suggest you think very carefully before you speak. Sylvie's mouth snapped shut. Graham had been carrying suitcases to the cars, avoiding my gaze completely. But with only 30 minutes left on the clock, he finally approached me. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, his voice strained. "There's nothing left to talk about, Graham," I replied. "Yes, there is," he insisted. "Look, I admit things got out of hand. But we can fix this. We can reach a family agreement without involving lawyers and police." "What kind of agreement?" I asked, raising a single eyebrow. "You keep the house, of course," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "We accept that it was a mistake to come here without telling you. And in exchange, you drop all the lawsuits and we'll give back the stolen heirlooms." "Stolen by mistake," I said, a dry, humorless laugh escaping my lips. "Stolen by mistake? The heirlooms you accidentally misplaced in the confusion of moving?" Graham fell silent. "And the fake medical report was also a misunderstanding?" I continued. "And the request for property transfer due to mental incapacity? And publicly humiliating me by calling me a parasite?" "That wasn't me. That was Sylvie," he said, a note of desperation in his voice. "But you were there, Graham," I said, my voice dropping to a low whisper. "You saw me being humiliated by your wife in my own home. And you didn't say a word. I need you to tell me the truth right now. Why did you betray me?" The weight of my question hung in the air, heavier than the suitcases Graham was so desperately carrying. He looked at me, his eyes full of shame and pain, but also a raw, simmering resentment. I don't know what to say, Mom." "You knew exactly what to say, Graham," I countered, the words slicing through his pathetic excuse. "You knew you had to defend your mother, but you chose to stay silent so you wouldn't contradict your wife." "Sylvie was stressed, Mom. She had her whole family here. The kids were restless, and that gave her the right to insult me on my own property." Graham's frustration finally boiled over. "Okay, Sylvie behaved badly. I admit it. What else do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me the truth," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. "I want you to admit that you planned to steal my house using fake documents. I want you to admit that you betrayed me for money." "I didn't betray you for money," he exploded, his face red. "I did it for my family." "And what am I, Graham?" I asked, the words a quiet dagger. "Am I not your family?" "Yes, you're my family," he said, his voice strained. "But Sylvie and the kids are my primary responsibility now." "So your primary responsibility is to rob your mother?" "It wasn't robbing," he insisted, his hands running through his hair in a gesture of pure frustration. It was securing the future of my children by destroying the present of the one who gave you life." The silence that followed was absolute. Graham's desperate attempt at a justification had finally revealed the brutal, ugly truth. It wasn't just about greed, it was about something far more profound and insidious. He had betrayed me because he had come to believe I didn't deserve what I had. "There it is," I said, my voice so quiet it was barely a whisper. "The truth. You didn't betray me out of love for your family. You betrayed me out of resentment, because my success, my sacrifices became a psychological burden you couldn't bear. My financial independence made you feel weak and inadequate." "I didn't say that," he shouted, his face contorted in a mix of shame and rage. "You didn't have to say it, Graham. You just screamed it. Do you know what the saddest thing about all this is, son?" I asked him, the sorrow in my voice a stark contrast to his fury. "If you had asked me for help directly, I would have helped you. If you had told me you were having financial problems, we would have found a solution together." "But I knew you would say no," he cried. "How did you know if you never asked me?" "Because you've always been very attached to your money, very controlling with your life's work," he said, his words a desperate stream of accusations. "Controlling?" I said, a dry, bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Graham, I paid for your college. I bought you your first car. I lent you the down payment for your house. I've helped you financially dozens of times in your adult life. The only condition I ever had was that you be honest with me. I finally understood everything. Graham hadn't betrayed me out of greed. He had betrayed me out of pride. His male pride couldn't stand the thought of continuing to depend financially on his old mother. You know what, Graham? I finally said. You're right. I should have forced you to be more independent when you were younger. I should have let you solve your own problems instead of always rescuing you. But it's too late to change the past. And now you're going to have the opportunity to be completely independent, because from now on, you're going to solve all your financial problems without my help. Thomas checked his watch. Folks, you have 10 minutes left. The final stampede was chaotic. Sylvie yelled orders, the kids cried, and Graham carried the last suitcases with a look of total defeat. When they were all finally in their cars, Sylvie rolled down her window and screamed one last threat at me. This isn't over, you bitter old lady. We're going to appeal. We're going to prove that you're crazy. Go right ahead, I replied calmly. My lawyer will be waiting for you. The cars drove away, kicking up a cloud of dust in my driveway. Graham was the last to leave. He looked at me in the rearview mirror, but I had already turned my back. Walter approached. How do you feel, Mrs. Vance? Tired, I answered honestly. But free. Free from having to pretend that we're a happy family. Free from having to excuse betrayal with maternal love. Free from pretending that this can be fixed with forgiveness and forgetting. The police officer said his goodbyes, the notary finished his paperwork, and Walter handed me the keys to my own house. Mrs. Vance, your house has been officially recovered, he said. The words a profound punctuation to the end of a long, painful chapter. I walked up the steps of my terrace and sat in my favorite wicker chair, the one that had been so cruelly covered in wet towels just days before. For the first time in a week, I was alone in my own home. The silence was deafening, but it was a healing, sacred silence, not the mocking emptiness of a stolen sanctuary. The final act of this play, however, was still to come. I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. 1 week after the eviction, my beach house had regained its original peace. I had hired a professional cleaning service to erase all traces of the invasion. The strange smells had disappeared, the furniture was back in its correct places, and my beloved studio was once again a haven of creativity, though some of my designs were beyond repair. But the real justice was just beginning to unfold. Walter called me on Friday with news that brought a rare smile to my lips. Mrs. Vance, he said, his voice brimming with a quiet satisfaction. I have some important updates. The doctor who signed the fake dementia report has been suspended by the medical board. The investigation revealed that he had signed at least a dozen similar reports in exchange for cash. And the legal consequences for Graham and Sylvie? I asked, the name of my son now a distant echo. Ah, that's the best part. The prosecutor decided to proceed with criminal charges for asset fraud and conspiracy. It's no longer just a civil matter. It's a criminal case now. What exactly does that mean? It means they could face jail time if they are found guilty. And it also means that all the legal fees they've had to pay have been enormous. They have already depleted their savings trying to fight the charges, and the worst is yet to come for them. That same afternoon, I received an unexpected call. It was Isabel, Sylvie's sister, crying hysterically on the phone. Eleanora, please, we need to talk. Sylvie is desperate. Graham has spent over $20,000 on lawyers, and the legal proceedings aren't even finished yet. And what does that have to do with me? I asked, my voice calm and indifferent. We want to apologize. We want to fix things. Do you want to fix things, or do you need me to drop the lawsuits because you're running out of money? Ma'am, please! Sylvie has kids to support. Graham could lose his job if this goes public at his office, she pleaded, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. She should have thought about her kids before she planned to rob me, I replied, the coldness in my voice a stark contrast to her desperation. And Graham should have thought about his job before he conspired to commit fraud against his own mother. But you already got your house back. You already won! Why keep punishing us? Because getting my house back doesn't erase the humiliation. It doesn't return the stolen heirlooms. It doesn't eliminate the psychological damage of being betrayed by my own son. We can give the heirlooms back. They're at my mom's house. The heirlooms you took by mistake? I said, the irony not lost on me. The heirlooms you accidentally stole during the confusion of moving? Ma'am, please, she cried. Isabel, I said, my voice final. Tell your sister that if she wants to talk to me, she can come here personally and bring all the stolen heirlooms, and tell her to come alone." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and profound sadness. The satisfaction came from watching the carefully orchestrated plan they had designed to destroy me fall apart. The sadness came from knowing that my relationship with Graham was probably over forever. The boy I had loved so fiercely was a man I no longer recognized, a man who had chosen greed and pride over the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. 2 days later, Sylvie appeared at my door. She came alone, without Graham, with a large canvas bag in her hand and eyes swollen from crying. She looked a world away from the arrogant woman who had stood on my terrace just a week before. I let her in without a word and gestured for her to sit in my living room. She placed the bag on the table and began to take out my heirlooms, one by one, her hands trembling. "Here are the pearl earrings," she said, her voice a cracked whisper. "Here is the gold watch, and here are the silver coins." She also pulled out a beautiful antique silver locket that had belonged to my own mother. "And here's the locket that we also took by mistake." "By mistake?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Ma'am," she began, the word of respect a stark contrast to her previous insults. "The truth is, I took them to sell them. We needed the money urgently. We have so many debts. Graham lost a lot of money in some bad investments last year. We're behind on our mortgage. Our credit cards are maxed out and the kids need school." She started to cry, the tears of desperation now real and raw. "And that's why you decided to rob me?" "It wasn't robbing," she insisted. It was asking for your help indirectly by invading your house and publicly humiliating you. When Graham told me you had this beautiful house and that you almost never used it, I thought maybe you would just let us use it. I never wanted to take it from you. You just wanted to use it while I wasn't here. And when you saw how expensive it was to maintain, you thought it would be better for the house to be officially Graham's? To avoid legal problems?" I said, mocking her previous words. "That was the idea of the cheap lawyer we consulted," she cried. "He told us it was the fastest way to transfer property between family. He said it wasn't fraud if it was between immediate family." I was silent for a long moment, processing the level of ignorance and sheer naivety they had demonstrated. They had ruined their lives financially and legally because they followed the advice of a corrupt, incompetent lawyer. "Where is Graham?" I finally asked. He didn't want to come," she said, her voice barely audible. "He says you're not his mother anymore. He says a real mother wouldn't sue her own son. That you chose money over family." The words hurt more than I expected, but they also confirmed that I had made the right decision. "And what do you think, Sylvie?" I asked, my gaze steady. I think we started all of this," she admitted. "But I also think you took things too far. We could have resolved everything as a family without lawyers or police. How could we have resolved it as a family if you never told me the truth?" I countered. "If you lied to me, deceived me, and planned to rob me behind my back? Families respect each other, Sylvie. And you disrespected me in every way possible." "But families forgive," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Families respect each other, and you disrespected me in every way possible. You tried to destroy me," I said, my voice low and final. Sylvie got up to leave. "So there's no way to fix this?" "The way to fix this," I said, "was not to do it in the first place." After she left, I sat on my terrace, watching the sunset over the sea. The waves crashed against the shore with their eternal rhythm, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding on land. I had gotten my jewelry back, but I knew I would never get my son back. The loss was profound, an emptiness that no legal victory could fill. A week later, Walter called me with the final news. "Mrs. Vance, Graham, and Sylvie have accepted a plea deal. They're going to pay a fine of $25,000 each. They're each going to do 200 hours of community service and will be on probation for 2 years. "No jail time?" I asked, a faint note of disappointment in my voice. "No, but they will have a permanent criminal record," he said. "And the fake doctor's report has been officially annulled. Your mental capacity is completely clean legally. As for their legal fees, They've spent over $30,000 on their defense lawyers. Between the fines and the legal fees, it cost them over $80,000 to try to rob your house. $80,000. Almost half the value of my home. They had lost more money trying to steal from me than they could have possibly gained. That night, alone in my recovered studio, I took stock of everything that had happened. I had lost my son. That was the most painful truth. Graham had chosen resentment over repentance, pride over forgiveness. He had chosen the manipulation of his wife over the woman who had loved him unconditionally. But I had gained something far more valuable. My dignity, my independence, and the confirmation that Eleanora Vance was still a strong, intelligent woman capable of defending herself from any threat. My 65 years hadn't turned me into a defenseless old lady. They had turned me into a wise woman with resources, contacts, and the determination to protect what I had built with so much effort. The next month, I decided to do something I had never done. I hired a full-time security service to take care of the house when I wasn't there. Not because I couldn't do it myself, but because I wanted to make sure no one could ever invade it again without my knowledge. I also changed all the locks, installed security cameras, and updated my will to leave the house to a scholarship fund for aspiring young designers instead of to Graham. If he wanted total financial independence, he was going to have it. 6 months later, I received a letter from Graham. A letter, not a call. He didn't even have the courage to talk to me directly. "Mom, I hope you're doing well. The kids ask about you. Sylvie and I have learned our lesson. Maybe someday we can be a family again." I didn't answer the letter. A true family doesn't betray each other for money. A true family doesn't humiliate its elders. A true family doesn't plan robberies using fake documents. Graham had decided that money and pride were more important than his mother. I had decided that my dignity was more important than my own broken heart. There is a powerful lesson in this tragedy that I want to share with all of you. It's a lesson about the true meaning of family and the price of betrayal. This story is proof that a woman's worth is not determined by her age, but by her strength, her wisdom, and her unwavering will to fight for what is right. We all build sanctuaries in our lives, whether it's a home, a career, or a family. But the most important sanctuary of all is the one you build within yourself, your integrity. Never let anyone, not even those you love, take that from you. If this story moved you, if you see a piece of yourself in my fight for justice, please consider subscribing. Your support helps me share more stories of resilience, and it reminds us all that even in the face of profound betrayal, we are never truly alone.